All right, we'll call to order Rocky Hill Board of Education Budget Workshop, Thursday, January 26, 6:30, in the Town Hall Council Chambers. If everyone can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance. All right, good evening, everyone. We are here for the second part of the Board of Education Budget Workshop. Hopefully, if everyone is amenable to it, the format tonight is we're going to start with Dr. Zito going over responses to some of the questions by board members last meeting, as well as some that he received via email. Then we will turn it over to the technology presentation and then proceed back through the budget book. At some point halfway through, we'll plan on taking a brief recess. The goal, I think, tonight should be, if all goes well, to try to get through the budget book. We'll see how we make out for time and how far the process takes us. So with that, Dr. Zito.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. So you have in front of you responses to a number of questions, and I appreciate the board members. Many of you submitted questions, so we'll try to move through this. We'll start right away with the first one. It's a follow-up on the special education tuition for outplacements at both private and public schools. You know, we've got a written response there, but to summarize it, essentially, we had finalized the current fiscal year's budget, and last spring, 4 additional students were outplaced. And as I wrote in the cover letter to the board, it's one of the most unpredictable aspects of the budget is the special education costs, because some of these students have expensive outplacement costs, needs, and so forth that are unique. So there's a lot of fluctuation there. The other thing to keep in mind is that we have students with severe disabilities are typically entitled to education until their 22nd birthday. So this is an area where, to the board's credit, you've given us the authority to go ahead and create a lot of in-district programming. So within this response, I also want to share with you that, you know, when Ms. Stevenson came to the district, we had approximately 20 kids outplaced. You see the numbers in that response to number 1. Right now, we have 11 kids outplaced. We're going to be starting the school year with 10. The numbers are up because tuition tends to go up. Costs can change. A student may need a full-time nurse. We're built for that. The transportation's expensive. So although it's $120,000 overall on an increase, you know, that's kind of where we are budgeting, because we don't want to be too drastic in terms of reducing that number, because we want to be able to have some cushion if there's additional costs. So what I do want to also point out is that your directive to us to create we have a number of programs in the district, the Compass programs, the Life Skills programs, the Dream Academy. We have about 58 kids right now that are in those specialized in-district programs. The numbers, as you saw the other night, overall in special education have gone up dramatically. So without your kind of direction, and really Ms. Stevenson and her staff, the creativity they've demonstrated, we'd probably be well above 20 if we were in the traditional model of outplacing kids. And my guess would be maybe 30 to 35 kids would be outplaced. So I think maybe more, okay. But the in-district programming really has so, you know, and that came with a cost. You allowed us to hire additional staff to do that. But given the individual costs of outplacements, it was a good decision. So, again, we want to underscore that you've done a lot of good things as a board. That was one of them. The other, obviously, was keeping the schools open during COVID, had a positive impact as well. So a lot of good decisions have been made by this board, but the flexibility you've given us to meet their needs in district is really important. With that being said, there are some students whose needs are so significant, medical and so forth, that outplacements are the best situation for that child. And at the end of the day, the overall takeaway on special education is every program is individualized. So when we don't want to outplace kids, but when it's in the best interest of the child, we're going to do it, because that's what's best for that kid and that family.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay. I don't want to laugh at the second question, but the age of the microscopes, they are 40 years or older. Miss Robertson was happy to report that she's been here 41 years, and most of them were there when she arrived. With that being said, she did buy a small number in 1990, and they're only used in grade 6. We probably, her estimate today, we spoke briefly, we may have 25 or so. There's 2 types. We're talking about that informally, but you've got kind of what's the stereoscope microscope, which is more of like the magnifying glass that you look at. Stereoscope, you don't need you're just looking at a hard surface, like looking at a rock surface or something. And then the compound microscopes where the light shines through and you're using the glass plate. The interesting thing, though, is if you think about your appliances at home, those 40-year-old microscopes, if they're working, are probably working more effectively than new material. By new microscopes, probably have a 4 or 5 year lifespan, cheaper materials, and falling apart. So with that being said, the science department, again, they use it exclusively in grade 6. Occasionally, a 7th or 8th grade teacher will borrow a microscope from the 6th grade science labs. But we could certainly look at some pricing if the board would like us to do that in terms of buying some new microscopes. It's a small number, though, according to the department I spoke to today. There's 25 to 30 total in the school. So if you want us to do a little research, you don't adopt a budget until March, so we could certainly get some information to you regarding pricing on 25 or 30 microscopes.
Okay, question 3?
Okay, question 3 was about the staff allocations between GMS and Rocky Hill High School for world language. And if you remember, last year I had recommended a full position for Spanish because the numbers in those Spanish courses in particular are growing. And we also, for those of you that are new to the board, years ago, the district began the world language experience in grade 7. It now starts in grade 4. So we needed to increase the contact time in 6th grade, which we were able to do. We coded that position because, remember, we start our budget, literally, we start planning September, October. So it was coded budgeting purposes as a high school position, although we knew all along we'd look at course enrollments later on. So when we actually made the hire, we split the assignment, 3 classes at the high school and 2 at the middle school. So there's no change in the FTE allocation. It's still 10.4. And there's no change in the way we're going to be set up for next year at both schools. It's a technical change on paper because we coded it last year as a high school position full-time, but it was never really a high school position full-time. It was 0.6, 0.4. Any questions on that? All right, if you look at question 4.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do the numbers still reflect that Spanish is still a heavy?
Yes, Spanish is our most popular world language, but adding the 3 sections at the high school and 2 at the middle school did 2 things. It relieves pressure at the high school in the Spanish courses, and it also allowed us to increase the contact time in grade 6. The kids doubled the amount of world language contact in grade 6. So that was, a good decision that the board made, and we're not asking for any more world language for next year, but I think that was a good step in last year's budget.
Thank you.
So question 4, there was a question about tutoring support. Those are the part-time positions that support math, reading, and ESOL, kids learning English as their second language. If you turn to the 3rd page, you have a chart. And if you recall, the question essentially was about operating budget versus grants. So I want to talk you through this chart. We broke it down today. The first chart shows you the math, reading, and TESOL support by elementary school, including GMS as well for this, because there's some tutoring positions there as well. So you could see the grant funding versus the operating budget by each distinct area: math, reading, ESOL. Then if you look at the second chart, it's the overall total of the tutoring positions. So GMS, math, reading, ESOL totals out to 2.23, Mosher 2.36, Stevens and West Hill identical, 4.13. The big distinction there is Stevens, all of the positions are funded through the federal grants because they're eligible based on the free and reduced numbers. So we can use the federal money there. The West Hill positions, the immigrant grant, as I mentioned the other night, we had an immigration grant that went away. So we've shifted costs over to the operating budget. So the allocation is equalized. The enrollments are very similar at both schools, but the funding mechanism is completely different. And I'm not sure that I explained it clearly the other night. So I think this chart, Brian, you had asked for this. I think
Yeah, I mean, you explained it clearly.
this lays
but
it
this
out.
Lays it out.
pretty clearly, yeah.
Yep, it's good
So
information.
just wanted, we didn't want people to think that Stevens was not getting the same amount of support, because it's identical in terms of support. Okay, question 5. Again, it's another chart, but Mr. Gavin had asked for the telecommunications to be broken out. So the net total is about 138,000, and you can see in the chart, we break it out for the wide area network, the cell phone costs, the internet, and so forth. I think it's pretty clear there how it breaks out. Chris is here, he's going to present later, but happy to answer any questions you have about this area.
I just, the phone lines, are they internal or are they all outgoing? So can anyone just pick up a phone and dial out, or
We have a dial-out mechanism, yeah.
everyone, for every phone?
I don't know the answer to that, Chris. Does every phone in the district have the dial-out? 9 dial? Yes. Okay.
We're actually renegotiating with Frontier, getting long distance and everything built into it now. That's part of an ongoing project. We're actually upgrading all of our traditional PRI lines to fiber, and including all of that, digitize it, so it should, we're doing it at no cost to us. We are upgrading that. They do have the ability to dial out from the district.
Okay.
Okay. All right, number 6 was a question about updating smart boards. Chris and I spoke today, the IT department within the proposed budget is going to install 8 new smart boards at West Hill and 7 at Stevens this coming summer. So that's going to mean that each of those 2 primary schools, every classroom will be equipped with a smart board no older than 3 years. So the other note we put in there, just for your information, Mosier, relatively new, only a couple years old, they have the Epson BrightLink boards in each classroom. So once we finish that summer tech plan, we'll be pretty up to date in every classroom in the district at the elementary level.
Are you going
Any-
to keep them on a replacement?
if we
Yeah,
cycle?
we'll get into that tonight, but that's a good question. But Chris does have a refreshment plan. It's
If
a
everyone could just
5-year
do me one
cycle.
favor and just look and raise your hand, only because that way we won't have competing questions. I'm sorry, no, that's fine. Go ahead, Nancy, please.
No, he
Okay.
answered.
Yeah, and Mr. G will get into it with more detail later on as we work through everything. Okay. All right.
Do you have a comment too, Mr. Yee? Oh, I saw you look up. Okay. All right.
Okay, next question. Do Mosier, Stevens, and West Hill have Chromebook carts where the devices can be stored at school and charged overnight? The quick answer is Stevens and West Hill do. They have carts or tech tubs because we don't send the Chromebooks or the iPads home with the kids at that young age. Mosier does not have the charging carts in the classrooms because the kids take the devices home every night. They're generally pretty good about remembering to charge them, but if they don't, there's a loaner program in the Library Media Center. So that's how we're handling it right now.
Questions? No? Do you want to continue? I know, I was waiting for, see, I knew. There you go.
I'm debating on whether or not just to wait for Chris to speak or not, because I think the question that I was trying to get at was the wear and tear on the Chromebooks, and the simple fact that I heard that there were some websites that had to be turned off because kids, and I know this for a fact because I have twin boys who take their Chromebook home every night, they're playing games on them. And to be honest with you, I'm tired of it. I want them to keep the Chromebooks at school. And so I was just wondering, with the very extensive amount of money that's going towards the Chromebooks over the next couple of years, would it just be easier to keep them back at school? 4 and 5, because they're not, for the most part, I have one son who's doing like vocabulary at home once a week.
I mean, we could, I'm not going to give you a quick answer other than I think we could investigate that at a curriculum committee meeting.
Okay.
I'd want to have Dr. Diaz there. We might want to invite some of the 4th and 5th grade teachers, Darlene.
Sure.
I will say.
Because the board we were pretty intentional when we went to the Chromebook program about not letting the younger students bring them home, because a second grade kid bringing an iPad or a Chromebook home. But the thought at the time was the 4th and 5th graders would benefit from having them. We could certainly revisit that, but I'd want to do it at a curriculum committee meeting if that was okay with Mr. Dillon.
Yeah, there was certainly, I guess I would call it a social equity issue as to why we allowed the kids to bring them home at that age group. Some kids do not have a device in their house.
Okay.
So those that were economically disadvantaged just made sure that they had a device in their house for additional learning or schoolwork.
I wasn't
Can't
sure if
police it in
yeah.
every household, but
Yeah, I
you're
wasn't
right.
sure if it came out through COVID, because
No.
obviously I wasn't on the board yet, if that was one of the reasons
No,
it
it was
started
pre-
going
it
home
was
or
pre-COVID
pre that.
that-
Yeah,
Okay.
the board
Okay.
went to one-to-ones 2 or 3 years before COVID.
Okay.
One-to-one devices.
It started with bring your own, and
Yeah.
that opened up a whole world of
Okay.
disadvantages between kids, and then we standardized the Chromebooks.
Okay. All right.
All right,
Good to
any
know.
other questions about Chromebooks? All right, question number 8.
So 8 was about the fact that we have a lot of zero increase for line items for supplies. And basically, that is accurate. They're flat funded or zero increased because essentially the enrollment, the quick answer, the enrollment's stable. So we're not projected to increase or decrease dramatically. So with the same amount, roughly speaking, of classroom teachers, same amount of students assigned to each class, we flat fund it, which doesn't mean they don't get their supplies. They're getting their supplies. The teachers do a great job of preserving unused supplies and then carry them over to the following year as well. So, think about a classroom ordering, 40 consumables of some particular item. If 15 are left over at the end of the year, we just roll them forward. So, I just want people to understand a zero increase doesn't mean zero line item. It just means no increase to the existing line item. So,
Any questions on that? Okay, question 9.
next was a request about the 60 new desktops. The breakdown, Mr. Gavin, is there for you, sir. 16 for the central office. You can read it for yourself, but you see they're spread throughout the central office and the schools. Every device that's been scheduled for replacement is at least 6 years old. There'll be 7 by the time we hit the replacement schedule. And they've all been upgraded once with new memory to stretch out, but they do reach a lifespan issue where they're no longer viable.
So we'll start with you, Mr. Gavin.
So
I guess-
that's the answer to your question.
Yes.
All right, so then I'll have a follow-up question.
So Chris, you might want to come up and have a seat near me.
No, this will be a simple question.
Okay.
Of the 60 devices that are being purchased, how many of the people they're being purchased for also have a laptop?
Probably most. I don't know the answer to that. I could say for the central office, probably everybody. I certainly have a laptop because I need to close school on snow days. I try not to. But I have that
My kids were
laptop.
very upset. My wife, very happy.
Yeah.
I was at work. It didn't really matter.
I figured you would be happy too. I thought of you, actually. I said, he's
I
gonna be
was. You know me. Keep the kids in school.
Keep him
I
in
mean,
school.
You keep them year-round.
I knew
if you
Mr.
want.
Slatter would be happy too. I know the board. So Chris, I don't know the answer to the question regarding the school. My sense is most folks have access to a laptop as well.
After the board's initiative to have at least teachers, certified staff have laptops. At this point, in every classroom, certified staff should be carrying a laptop, and there's a desktop attached to the AV for everybody.
So, I guess my mission, I guess is what I would call it, I guess, based on, Brian probably would say that, is I know that everyone wants a desktop. I don't know that everyone needs a desktop if they have a laptop. If it's a matter of docking stations or not, I just think that if there's an opportunity to improve the technology across the board, so instead of buying a lesser laptop, a better laptop, instead of having 2 computers, turn it into one that's a higher quality, I think there's an opportunity here to either increase the students' technology based on the savings associated with everyone having both a desktop and a laptop, or getting rid of one and doing that. I personally haven't had a desktop in 10 years, and I've gotten along fine without it. And to have 2 computers per person at $95,000, $75,000, $75,000, and $75,000, which is the desktop line item for the next 4 years, I think there's an opportunity there.
Look forward to your budget proposal. We will continue through, Mr. Gavin. Absolutely. That's something we can certainly discuss. I think we'll get more information when we go through the technology report today.
I got it out.
Well, we
Anything
can-
else to say?
We'll continue to deliberate it, absolutely. Okay, any other questions on desktops? Okay, we're going to move on to question number 10.
So this was about the 115 new iPads. And basically, you have the response there. They're strictly replacement iPads for pre-K, kindergarten, and special education devices that are aging out of the Apple security updates, not additional devices. They're not assigned to classroom teachers. They're strictly for kids. And we're asking you to consider the maintenance of the equipment that supports the board's one-to-one device initiative. This was really reinforced as Chris helped put this answer together during the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, Chris can speak in more detail, but with Apple in particular, some of these devices just age out of, even though it might be turning on and functioning, the upgrades won't upload after a certain age, particularly with the iPad. So, we have a plan laid out on a replacement cycle, and the vendor has their protocols regarding how long they support and patch these products. And Apple's in the business to make a little money, so.
It can't be
After
updated,
5-7
sir.
years, they
Yep,
they
it
fail.
can't be updated. Yep,
Yeah, so that's the answer.
4 iPad paperweights at home, so.
Yeah, they just, you can't do anything, and the operating system won't upgrade and everything else.
Mine all broke before they got to that.
All right, any questions about the iPads? All right, moving on to number 11.
Number 11, is it possible to get a list of each of the educational tech packages and licenses we're currently paying for? For example, IXL, iReady, Desmos. So we have some charts that relate to this entire question, including the technology repair line item. So if you flip to the technology budget in your packet, you'll see the software broken down by program. And you can see the costs, range from very little, $55, up to, $28,000. And then you can see on the second page, district-wide type of programming software. And then we have some on the third page that's specific to curricular areas such as language arts, Lexia, we hear that one a lot. We've talked about Desmos and the moving Desmos from one line item to another. So you have the whole software breakout, about $428,000. And then the next question related within that question was the repair line item. And that's the final page in your packet, and it's a $143,000 line item, and you can see how the repairs are broken out. And again, additional questions on this, we can certainly get into when Chris goes through his section this evening.
All right.
Now, one other item within this packet, Mr. Dillon, going back to the questions, I just, for the board's, just facilitate the conversation for the board, because I know you're keeping this material. These were 3, they weren't really questions, they were just considerations for the board. The Library Media Center, should the iPads be moved to the tech line? That was one question that was thrown out. The classroom furniture for GMS, which really does need some replacements, should that be moved to the CIP? And then the Facilities Committee should it begin studying the feasibility of installing rooftop solar panels. So I just added that to your packet so that we don't lose sight of those comments that were made the other night. And Brian, I think we agree some of this is going to require some committee work, some of these questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, any additional final questions on this package provided by Dr. Zito? My left, any questions or comments? To my right. All right, we'll continue now with the technology presentation.
Some fun hiring this summer, and they all made sure that they filled in all those holes for me while they were trying to get through it. So I just wanted to shout them out to begin with because they really have put in the effort this year. Great. So tech, we have some of similar challenges as everyone else this year. Costs are rising immensely. I've had some vendors quote me 15 to 20% increase on services alone. I know some of our equipment, especially with our E-rated networking equipment to do refreshes, they've quoted me 10 to 15% just on the hardware alone, let alone the services that they also provide at the same time. So, that said, necessary projects for this year. We can do our annual 4th and 9th grade Chromebook refreshes. That's on our standard cycle. To refresh you, a student gets a new Chromebook in 4th grade, carries with them all the way until they start 9th grade. In 9th grade, they receive a new Chromebook. That carries them through the end of their high school career, and they end up keeping the Chromebook on their way out, because we've always deemed that after 4 years, the value of that Chromebook is better in the hands. And again, the same sort of comments we've made about equity also play into that factor. We need to replace one switch at that one will be going into Stevens. That is to complete a what's called a fabric network across our entire district. And then the big one is we need to start replacing the high school and Stevens wireless access points. Part of that tech plan audit that we performed this summer basically showed us that our wireless access points have been ignored for a little while, and at this point they are essentially completely aged out of support by the vendor. And that is starting beginning of 2024. So as part of this plan, as part of the ongoing budget, we need to replace those at least 2 buildings this year, because the following year, every lasting access point in that group are actually going to be completely out of support. So at that point, it'll be on my staff to maintain them, and basically, they're not going to replace them if something goes down. We're going to have to keep all of our spares from this year, replace them next year to make sure that stuff stays up and running. Obviously, our wireless is used for everything, and the biggest issue with it is our testing. Well, our testing's on wireless, so we have to make sure that that stays up and functional. Now, all of that is reimbursed partially through E-rate funding every year. One of the unique challenges this year is our E-rate funding is a little bit less. Generally, we get 50% reimbursement. This year, we're trending at about 40%, and that's because of free reduced lunch enrollment decreases, probably because lunch has been free for the past year and a half. So that is driving up a cost on that equipment. We spoke about the iPads already. Again, those are strictly replacements. These were all devices that we had before the pandemic. They were moved around at that time to make sure every student had a device in their hands when they went home. So all of those devices are strictly replacements. Desktop refreshes. We talked about the 60 general replacements in classes. On top of that, we have the high school tech labs. Those are higher end machines that are running engineering. Those need to be replaced. Those have been, like the other 60, we've stretched those as long as we could, and they're getting to the point where the engineering software is just not running on them anymore. The two primary elementary school library media center labs, rather than replacing the entire labs, we're going to have 5 new desktops in each of those to supplement, so that those students can use it for password resets and the like. Curriculum is changing the way they're using the LMC labs. Students will bring their Chromebooks and their iPads with them when they do go to tech class. Administrator laptops. Our administrator laptops, some of them are very old, some of them are newer. We want to try and get everyone a functional device that they can rely on at home and in district. If any of those slightly newer devices have any life, they will go to either my department, because most of my guys don't have laptops, and also to spares to supplement whichever program we end up using. Replication server refresh. We replaced, or are replacing, the 3 main core cluster machines at the high school this year. This is the replication site for disaster recovery. That's going to be replaced as a matching unit to better our disaster recovery plans. A big ticket item is the SAN replacement. That is the storage for basically 3/4 of the district's services at the high school. That system was put in before the high school was refurbished, and at this point it's both at capacity and past its life expectancy. Phone handsets. This is an ongoing project since Mosier opened, actually trying to get all of our phones on one enterprise system so that everything is both disaster resilient as well as modern and functional in the case of being able to move our phones. If we have a building outage, we have a carrier outage, we can adapt to it and be able to move everything around. Currently, the only building in that system properly is Stevens. Mosier itself is not in there. So we learned this summer with Wendy that we had to buy new handsets. So we bought a set of emergency sets for Stevens to get them into the system. So this would complete the compatibility for the rest of the district. And then, as we discussed, finishing West Hill and Stevens displays for the audiovisual equipment, so everyone has a good functioning smart display. So, that being said, all those things we have to get done, my equipment line has been held at no change from last year. So you'll notice that line item is a 0 change, and we are going to try and do all of this replacements and upgrades based on that no increase. All of this gear I just mentioned there, we will have another meeting on the 5-year technology plan that is complete. All of the information and all of these decisions are driven by that audit. We found quite a bit of need to make sure that we're maintaining, honestly, an infrastructure that's very robust and reliable at this point. We want to make sure it stays that way. So these are overall budgets. I noticed, of course, I looked at this 100 times and noticed last minute that I missed my supplies line, which is basically an $8,000 line that's for toner and other incidental supplies. So that's why that number doesn't match what you have in your booklets. But overall, none of these line items have changed. They're all identical to last year. I did want to report on the board-funded device protection plan. I have to say this has gone incredibly well and has saved the school community a ton of money. We've had 115 covered claims this year, accidental claims. You can see the breakdown on the building there. Those totaled about $8,300 in accidental damages that otherwise would have been paid for by the families. That does not include the $25 a year that they would have been paying for the actual program that the board had covered. As of January 18th, we only had 2 repeat accidentals, so we've only had to send out 2 invoices for students that have broken their devices more than once. And I did want to note there were an additional 108 claims that my team has processed that we deemed as manufacturer warranties that previously would have gone against the insurance policy that we cover as part of our warranties. On top of that, I just had to say that this has drastically decreased administrative time, both with myself and my team and the building administrators. We don't have to argue about who's going to pay for this stuff. It's covered, it's taken care of, and everyone moves on. Student has a device in their hands, they're able to do their work. So, last slide. This was what I asked Dr. Zito for, to try and cover all of those things. You see what we asked for last year to try and cover everything we had last year. So we're going to be tight. We're going to do our best to get everything done we can and try to, again, make sure that we maintain the integrity of this infrastructure that we have. That's really all I have for you. Do you have any questions for me?
Open it up for some questions. I'll start to my right. Is there any questions on the technology presentation? Mrs. Manella?
I just want to make a comment. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm really impressed that you're keeping it at basically flat zero. I myself work in an ITD division, and I can sympathize with the costs of everything going up. So I'm interested to see how you're going to be able to do this on a flat-based budget here. It's impressive. I do have a question regarding the server replication here, the disaster recovery. Is this all a backup, like cloud-based, or?
No, so if you look at actually in the questions sheet that you got, that's listed as under, it's called Kaseya is the company. It's a Unitrans backup system. So through that system, we do have an on-premises and a secondary backup out to the cloud, which is really the only way you can prevent or recover from a ransomware attack. So that's why that is in place. So we do have both in-house backup and a cloud backup for that purpose. This disaster recovery is what they call a hot backup, which basically means if we lose the equipment at the high school, and again, remember, the equipment at the high school is 90% of the data and the functionality of the entire district. That can be immediately switched over to the backup. It's at a different site. It's an off-site hot backup. So basically, those cloud backups and even the on-premises backup would take hours to sometimes days, depending on how big the device is. Those hot backups come up within 15 minutes.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
It's to my right. Jessica? No?
Yeah, no, I do. Chris, thank you so much for highlighting all of this. I personally am concerned that your proposal is staying as is with everything that you just mentioned, because I'm worried about the safety of the server and, do you really think you can do all of this as is in a flat budget? I'm concerned that we're going to have safety issues in the network if things don't go the way that you plan and you run out of money. I see that as a issue, especially because a lot of, like you said, the testing is done online, and there are so many things that we need to keep secure. And
we are pushing things back. We're pushing things out, and I think that'll be even more clear once we go through the technology plan. We'll do our best to find it and scrape it together as we need to.
but if you needed more money, the amount that you would propose is the amount we see on the screen, the 487,000, is that?
Based on, and again, I'm pushing off.
Oh, it would be a 653. Oh, okay.
Yeah. We're pushing off,
That's a lot
we're
of,
pushing off an extra set of
Difference.
Chromebooks that we normally would do now to try and stretch it out. We're trying to replace the third grade devices to try and, again, my point was trying to spread it out across multiple years. And we're getting to a point where, we keep pushing it back. We're gonna keep pushing it back, and it's gonna build over time.
So he worked really hard. I'm going to interrupt here for a second. And he is clear about what the needs are. Keep in mind, I've come to you with about a 4.8. If we go with everything we'd love to have, that pushes the budget up to about 5.4, 5.5. So I'm not sure that a 5.5% budget is a feasible number. As a board, you can adopt any number you see appropriate. But I also try to put you in a situation where I think it's a realistic number, given all the fiscal cliffs we're facing. What we have historically done, and I don't know, as I mentioned to you, Ms. Lafredo, you had sent me an email. We won't know about any potential surplus until mid-May. We have circled back to the board. There's been years, for example, the year when the state shut everybody down in March, we accrued some decent savings, and we came back to the board and were able to make some additional expenses projecting into the following year. I don't know where we're going to be now. It's usually May where we figure this out. I don't think it's going to be a large number this year, but that's one thing we've historically been able to do, come back to the Finance Committee and look at that number. But, I'm the one who held it at 0 for the tech department because I didn't want to come in here with a 5.5% budget. With that being said, the board has every right to adopt the number it sees fit, and I appreciate Chris kind of putting the numbers out there, so. Just
And I think,
interrupted,
no,
but
and
I
I think
wanted
that's,
to make
I think
those
that's a
comments.
perfect
Yeah.
statement. I mean, obviously, it's the will of the board to adopt a number. Dr. Zito's presentation is to keep this flat right now. At the end of the year, if we know what a potential budget surplus is, if we have one, tech will compete with other items too. Capital costs, expenses for infrastructure improvement. It's all on the table for the board to do as it sees fit. But, the current proposal in front of us is to flat fund it. As we get through the end of the budget process, we can certainly talk about changing that, revising other line items, increasing this. It's all within our purview, as Dr.
Yeah,
Zito said.
100%,
So we can continue to have that dialogue.
My recommended budget is the starting point for the
Yep.
board. My job is to come in and give you
Yep.
some idea of what I think will work, knowing that there are sacrifices we have to make, knowing that 4.8 is still a relatively high number.
Yeah.
Given some of the challenges we're facing. So this is a uniquely tough year.
And partially because of the cliff with the ESSER money. That's really what's impacting us. All right, we're going to go tech questions to my left. Mr. Gavin's been patiently waiting. Mr. Gavin.
I guess my only question is, what's in that difference? I'm not saying we need to,
Yep.
talk about it, but I would like to, at least be able to consider what the items are that are in the difference between, I don't know if I'd go 650, but,
300.
what are the other items that you would like to see, Chris?
Um,
You don't have to tell, you just get it to us.
I can
but-
give you just a very
Just a
bird's
brief
eye,
summary, yeah.
Is basically we'd end up with lesser equipment to cover the needs.
So
So
what he's asking, Chris, is what's in that 300,000 that was recommended
We're
but not
removing?
presented today? Yeah. Just summarize some of the items that didn't make it into your current budget.
absolutely.
Probably what's highlighted.
Um,
It's highlighted right here, I think.
Additional networking refreshes, additional money for, I guess, towards the device protection plan, but I'll make that work because it really is very beneficial to everyone that's here. An additional grade level of Chromebooks that we were going to replace, that's a big chunk, that was $90,000. Let me see, what else did I cut out of here? A bunch of incidental stuff, iPad keyboards for LMC. So, there are several things that were on just my equipment list that we are And then again, we would have to lessen the capacity of the sand to try and keep the cost down instead of expanding it, have to keep it the same, make it do, shift things around, that sort of thing.
That's on the long page, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're just talking about, yeah.
And again, that long page you have is my projections based on the tech plan and all the things, and again, trying to spread it out as evenly as possible to make it more predictable, but.
So, I guess then my next question, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Follow up. What is, like, so in your projected launch plan here, what is in the 335?
I can get you a more
Okay.
specific answer.
Well,
guess I'm just-
The previous slide outlined what's in the 335.
He's going to try and do all of that.
What we're getting, yeah, from his PowerPoint, that's what we're getting, the 335.
Gotcha. Sorry, there's a lot of different
No.
things we're looking at here. Just trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Correct, Chris? That's what you presented is the 335. Any additional questions on the technology to my left? I have one, Chris. Oh, go ahead, Amber, I'm sorry.
I have one that I'm not sure if it's a budget question or if it goes to the curriculum, but it's just to follow up on what Mr. Gavin said on that continued discussion on, do teachers need both a desktop and a laptop? And I know we started that conversation in the curriculum
Yep.
session last year, so I think that is a discussion that needs to continue. I don't know that needs to be a budget.
I do know that Mr. Gavin spoke to me offline, and I am committed to revisiting that discussion again before the board adopts its final budget in March. So I am, Mr.
Okay.
Gavin had a lengthy, cornered me with a lengthy conversation.
To answer you directly as well, when we go through the technology plan that's written, I worked with curriculum and we came up with 3 different options for what we would consider a standard classroom. So when we go through that process, hopefully in the next month or so, we should be able to, I can present to you that as a part of it. And again, some of them have desktops, some of them don't. So it's a matter of,
Right.
we can absolutely have that discussion.
Thank you.
All right, I had one question, but I think Mr. Gavin wanted.
We've got 500 pages here, so the 335 includes the necessary projects.
Basically.
Thank you.
All set?
Yeah, and it will be tight, especially with the Chromebooks.
I have one quick
Yeah.
question.
Boy, I'm never gonna get to my question. Mr. Slattery, go ahead.
Very quick question. You mentioned that the E-rate funding supplement, that's tied
Yeah,
to,
that goes back to here.
That's our
based on,
free and
based on
reduced.
free and
Guess
reduced
I'm
lunch,
just
so
trying to
they,
figure out.
that's a state supplement and it's
It is.
based on those that apply for that?
Right, so the E-rate funding, we get a pool every 5 years. So you get a pool of money used for, so category 1 is used by Mr. Zettergren for part of our reimbursement for the telecommunications and sort of thing. Category 2 is specifically for infrastructure. So it's always been used for our network, our wireless, and everything in between. Again, traditionally, we get about 50%, but the way things have worked out this year with all of the other state programs, we're trending at about 40% for this fiscal year.
The value of the phone replacement, the 170 handsets for West Hill and High School, that's approximately $18,000, looking at your budget. And what would happen if we did not do that this year?
Those 2 buildings would not come into the enterprise level phone system. So those 2 buildings would be basically where they are status quo now.
Which, they're operating,
They're
just not an
functional.
enterprise
They're
system.
functional. The high school is not as big of an issue because it's a physical cable plant location where the phone lines come in. West Hill's phones are a little bit more vulnerable because their phone lines actually come into, I believe, the middle school and then traverse over our network to get out there.
The high school system's what, 6 years old now?
Something like that.
Yeah, okay.
And again, it's not the core. The core was upgraded
Yeah.
with Mosher.
Yeah.
It's the actual
Physical
handsets.
handsets, yep.
Can I ask an additional question?
Yes, that's what we're here for, Ms. Manoa.
Just
And I
to-
think Mr. Gavin had another one.
I'm feeling your pain up here, budget-wise. Have you looked into other resources like grant state funds? I know, that, like, you had mentioned some are falling off, but is there anything new that's coming up that you guys have searched?
Nothing new, purely new.
For grant funds, yeah.
Depending on the answer to our standard classroom information, we are talking about trying to use PECPESHA grant for some of that gear to offset and to jumpstart that project. We can't really do that until we nail down the option that we're going to go with. But that is, and again, depending on how that's decided, desktop replacements may not be desktop replacements. They may be docking stations and
Right.
monitors. They may be iPads. They may be however we decide to proceed.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mr. Gavin.
This is more of a request, Chris. Can you do a very similar spreadsheet that you have for your recommended proposal for what the 335 is?
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's it. I'm looking at 2 pages and I'm not sure what's included and what.
Sure.
All right, anything else on the technology? No? Okay, Chris, thank you so much. We will proceed on. And we are continuing tonight at the program budget page. The same format we did last meeting. We'll have Chuck or Dr. Zito and the team review the page, see if there's any questions, and then we'll continue on through. Chuck, are you taking the lead on this, or?
Yeah, I think we'll just, I believe under the object, we just went page by page. And then if anybody has any questions on a particular page, we'll try to get that answered. And if we can't answer it tonight, we'll get back to you.
All right. So we're on program summary page, correct?
Yes, yep.
All right. Want to briefly explain what this is, and then we'll.
So, again, just the, last night we looked at the object summary. All the numbers are the same. Obviously, it's just a format difference. This, under the program budget, it formats them, the budget by the program as it's stated. So it'll go by, you'll see the categories here. The Board of Education, administrative, improvement of instruction, and so on and so forth. And just from a chart of accounts, that's all those digits that you see in the detail pages. The chart of accounts is, the fund, and then the second number within the chart of accounts is the program, and then the object, and so on and so forth. So this is the second 2 digits, and that's what determines what the program is, and that's how these reports are formatted.
All right. To my right, any questions on page 1 of the program summary? No? To my left, any questions? No? Moving on to page 2. Any questions on page 2 of the program summary? To my left? Yeah, to my right, any questions? No? All right. Moving through to the next section, and now this is the report for the program summary, correct, Chuck?
Yeah, this is, again, this is the detail behind the program summary.
Yep.
So, in the first report we just looked at, for instance, you saw Board of Ed being 1 line. These are all the accounts that make up that. This is the detail that makes up that summary.
All right. Page 1, any questions to my right? To my left, any questions? No? All right. Moving on, page 2. To my left, any questions? To my right, any questions? No? All right, page 3. Salaries, professional development, advertising, printing. To my right, any questions? And to my left, any questions? No. Page 4, mileage, admin supplies, library materials. To my left, any questions? To my right. All right. Page 5, salaries, repairs, instructional supplies. Any questions to my right? To my left, any questions? No? All right. Page 6, now we're getting into specific areas of instruction. So we have some textbooks, business education, art. To my left, any questions? To my right? No. All right. Page 7, world language, English, and health education. To my right, any questions? To my left? No. I do know right there that big deficit for world language was a discussion we had about the instruction between different schools.
Right.
Yep. All right, page 8, health education, family consumer science, and tech ed. To my left, any questions? And to my right? All right, technology, education, and math, page 9. To my left, any questions? And to my right?
We'll just note that 397% math, that was offset, that was the Desmos, which was offset by the textbooks.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
641, I
Right.
think, was the other.
Right.
Yeah, that's why most of the changes, although it's formatted differently, you know,
already
naturally
been
it's the
reviewed.
We've
result
already
of
kind of
the.
gone through it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, page 10, math and media, maintenance supplies as well. To my right, any questions? To my left? No. All right, page 11, media services and music. To my left, any questions? To my right? All right. Page 12, equipment, instructional supplies. This is all music still. To my left? All right. Okay. Page 13, physical education and some language arts. Any questions to my right? To my left? All right. Page 14, language arts and science. To my left, any questions? To my right? Page 15, we have social studies, special education. Any questions to my right? My left?
Did we talk about those changes? Yeah, we did. All the special education changes, those are.
Yeah, so the 158,000 is the, you know, there's a teacher who was previously grant funded, that full salary's
right.
in there, a little over
Yeah.
100,000 plus
Yep.
some other, so we did address that, but to Chuck's point, in a different format earlier, under object detail.
All set? All right, page 16, special ed still. Any questions to my right? To my left? Special education again, page 17 to my left. To my right. And again, a lot of the bigger numbers we have already discussed. This is just a different format. Page 18, co-curriculum. To my right, any questions? To my left. Page 19, athletics. To my left. To my right. All right. Page 20, summer school and guidance. To my right. To my left. Nothing. All right. Health services, page 21. To my right. Left. All right, page 22, this is substitutes and others. Any questions to my left?
No, talked about all this.
Okay, to my right. All right, moving on, page 23, instructional supplies, other items, and there's some benefits here. To my right, any questions? My left. All right, 24, employee benefits, fiscal services, custodial salaries. To my left. Anything to my right? Big one here is the proposed increase in group medical.
Yeah.
All right, page 25, purchase services, to my left. And to my right. I think just going back to this, Dr. Zito, I know there was one question about our overall budget and surpluses through the years. And part of the issue for surpluses is that we have to estimate our utility expenses, which is an unknown. So we're projecting out for a year. Obviously, we have to be conservative because we get one allocation from the town. So when we talk about what our potential surplus is at the end of any year, it's potentially tied to some utility expenses, gasoline for buses and things like that, where we've had to be conservative because we only get that one allocation. It's actually okay that we have a surplus in those line items because it means I think we've done a good job to ensure that we have adequate funding for that. So that's really where this is tied into for the utilities. 26, repairs and maintenance. Any questions to my left? And right. 27, we have additional utilities, small equipment. Am I right?
I had a question.
Yes.
We're on page 27, right?
Yes.
When I was looking at these, the utilities, the percent difference, I was just wondering why the high school is so much more than the other schools. Is that because of?
Which school, I'm sorry?
High school.
High school.
Okay, I mean,
It's
it's,
open all weekend for park and rec
Okay.
activities.
I thought maybe the
It's open at
pool-
Well, the
night.
pool's part of it. The pool's a
Yeah.
big part of it, yeah.
Electricity,
Big
Yeah.
part
the
of it.
heating.
Yeah. I think that drives
It's
most
the
of
most
it.
used building in the district because of all, it really is like a community recreational center
Yeah,
after
that's
hours.
true.
Yeah.
You know, a few degrees in the
Which is
pool
nice, yeah, right.
over the winter makes a big difference in terms of
Yeah.
utility costs. All right, page 28. Sean thinks we should turn down the temperature in the pool. I was saying that.
It's not all that warm when you go in
The
it.
battle-
No, it's not.
You know, the constant battle on that issue is the swim team wants it cold
Yeah,
and the senior citizens like it warm.
Yeah.
Ron tries to
yeah.
thread the needle on that issue.
Yeah, it's cold. It's cold. It's
Oh,
cold.
80 degrees?
Wow.
Swimming laps in 80
The
degrees.
swimmers like it cold.
Miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wants it
Yeah.
cold.
I'd like
Yeah.
it cold.
Yeah.
It gets hot in there when you're sitting at those swim meets. I'll
Yes.
tell you that much.
Oh, yeah.
We used to go in there and run to suck weight for wrestling because it was so hot.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, 28, moving on. Transportation, computers and technology. Any questions to my left?
None other than what I already.
To my right. All right. Continuing on, 29, student support services and copiers. To my left. All right. All right, wrapping up page 30 here, we got student assessments, elementary classroom instruction. To my right? Left? None. All right. So now we've essentially seen the overall budget in 3 different formats.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, Dr. Zito, let's roll into grants and entitlements, please.
So Chuck can speak to the detail here, but we've laid it out. It's pretty straightforward. Darlene and Amy spend a lot of time managing the majority of these grants. for the instructional programs and for IDEA, which is the special education grant. You've got the numbers laid out in front of you. We're happy to answer any questions you have regarding any of the individual grants. No huge changes from year to year, really.
Well,
Not on the first page. anyway.
right.
Yeah. Second page, you'll see a reduction.
All right. It's looking at the first page. Any questions to my left regarding grants and entitlements on page 1? Any questions to my right? All right. I have one question, Dr. Zito, and I had it from your presentation earlier. When you gave us when we were talking about West Hill and Stevens, we talked about the Title I, II, and III grants, and West Hill and Stevens getting some percentage of that. GMS had a little, but in all cases, Mosher was 0. And why wouldn't Stevens and West Hill account for half of Mosher? Why would Mosher be 0, yet there's something in GMS? Because West Hill and Stevens feed into Mosher.
Those allocations are based on free and reduced lunch status. And if the parents are not submitting their free and reduced lunch program forms, then the school is not going to qualify.
So then we're saying at West Hill potentially, they're not, and the same with Mosher, but they are at Stevens and GMS?
Title I and Title II are based on free and reduced lunch, and then the Title III grant is based on EL support needs, so the needs of the English language learners. And then there was a previous grant not included here because we didn't qualify, but in the past, we've also gotten an immigrant grant, which tracks in percentage of increase of ELs over 3 years. And in the past, West Hill has qualified for that grant.
So am I wrong to think then that if between Stevens and West Hill, I'm gonna take Stevens for instance, we have students getting Title I and Title II. We have students at GMS getting Title I and Title II. Those students ultimately go to Mosher on their way to GMS. How are we at 0 at Mosher? They're just not applying?
It could be. I mean, with Mosher, it would be, because Stevens qualifies and West Hill doesn't, you know, you have the mix of students
That's
then
what I'm
going to
saying.
Mosher.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that Mosher, for whatever reason, that blend is not
Meeting the threshold.
entitling us to that grant.
And don't forget, we've been having free lunches and free breakfasts.
Yep.
So I don't think there's been a lot of incentives for families to complete that form. I'm just speculating.
And the only reason why I'm saying it, because then the numbers at GMS are potentially half of what Stevens is,
Right.
which makes sense, but Mosher's 0. That's what I,
Yeah. I mean, that's the, I don't know the details, to be honest with you, behind the grant calculation. But free, as Darlene had mentioned, free and reduced is a big part of
Part of
that,
the
but there are other factors as well. So, but we can.
I found it odd. Look,
Yeah,
does it stand
it
out
is.
to you or not? Yeah?
Yeah, it is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Does the transient population have anything to do with it?
Jessica just asked, is the transient population?
Baseline is free and reduced.
It's free and
which is a
reduced
proxy
lunch.
for poverty.
Right.
Okay.
It's a percentage of who has declared free and reduced lunch by October 1st, and then it's divided by your total enrollment on October 1st. And if you don't meet a certain threshold in your percentage, that school does not qualify. It's done school by school in this district because we don't have a large enough population to be considered a district-wide.
District-wide determination.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we can look at that. I'm just,
So we'll get
Yeah.
you some more.
yeah,
details.
it doesn't seem like it makes sense that we
Yeah.
should have
The
something at
calculations
Mosher.
are complex, but we can get you a spreadsheet with all that.
Yeah, and it may be as simple as we don't have enough families filling
We've
out.
reminded the families as we've sent out.
Yeah.
several
I've
letters
seen it. I've
asking
seen it.
folks to,
Yeah,
Still
Well,
fill
to
it, to still
Darlene's
fill it out.
point,
I mean,
the extension of the free lunch.
there's
And
really,
there is proposed legislation to feed every kid every
Yeah.
day free in Connecticut. So I don't know how that's going to affect
yeah,
the federal grants either down the road.
okay. Any additional questions on the first page of this? Mr. Gavin?
Well, I remember Chris said something about that affects him on the technology side as well.
Yep.
so.
Yeah,
E-rate, yeah.
same thing, same thing.
I'm
All
sorry.
right, any questions to my right on it? Okay. Page 2, Chuck.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out,
This one hurts.
Smaller, smaller ARP and ESSER special
Yeah.
ed grants, Amy mentioned them briefly. You know, they were all gone at the end of the year.
what's not, what's not reflected on this page, because we always go with the awarded grant for 21-22, but a couple of the larger ESSER grants were 2-year grants. So since it wasn't awarded in 21-22, it's not reflected here, but there's about, as Dr. Zito has mentioned in previous presentations, there was one for about $1 million, so we used half in 1 year and half this year, and that's going away. So in total, we're losing about $700,000 this year in the ESSER grants.
Any question on the COVID-19 relief? All right. District-wide personnel staffing.
So we have the FTE laid out for you on this chart. We caught, as we were going through it, Amy and I talked, there was one error on the chart. The actual for the current school year for the nurses is 7. One of those is funded through the federal grant. We're dropping to 6 next year. And we are still going to be able to meet all the needs in the district with 6 versus 7. The 7th really helped during COVID with all of the protocols and so forth, but that grant money's going away, and we've had a resignation, we've had a retirement, we have some movement in the nursing staff, so we'll be fine with 6, but we are going down 1 position there. Other than that, I think we went through everything. The rest of the sheet is accurate. You can see that the biggest cut is in the building subs, as I mentioned earlier. 1 from each school, and that's 2/3 of the staffing reduction. So we're not really asking for any additional FTE. We're going down next year really by about 7.5 positions.
Okay, if you could just maybe briefly just walk us through each school. I know we have it now going forward by school. See if there's any questions. There's really not a lot of changes, so.
Right. Yeah, so the first page is a district-wide summary. And
That's what I was referring to, the extra nurse, so you can see that on there.
Yeah, yep. So
And
we'll
you get
hop
into
over to the high school next.
High
Yep.
school's next.
yeah, the second page is just a brief description of, what those classifications are. And then we go each school, same information, just by school, and you can see the high school and GMS will have a lot more of the various subject matter teachers.
So high school, we're losing 1 building sub and a half of admin support.
Correct.
Any questions on the high school summary? All right, GMS, we're losing 1 building substitute. Any questions on that? Mosier, 1 building substitute. Any questions on that? Oh, 1 building substitute in 1 elementary classroom, correct, Dr. Zito?
That's correct.
And then gaining pupil personnel, right?
And we have the OT position at Mosier,
Gaining
Yeah.
although that probably will end up
That's
being
gonna
a
end up being different.
district-wide.
I think that was a question that came up the other night. It'll be district-wide, but it's coded to Mosier.
Oh, that's right, yep.
Does that mean a whole classroom?
That's 1 less classroom.
One fewer classroom teacher at Mosier
Yep.
at this point, based on the enrollments.
Okay.
We have a small cohort moving up, we can consolidate that.
All right, Stevens, 1 less building substitute, that's it. Any questions? Right, no? West Hill, we have 1 less building substitute and 1 less classroom, same issue, cohort size.
Yep. Still be well within the board guidelines.
Central office, next page remains the same. And pathways remains the same. All right, so any question on the staffing summaries? All right, let's move on to technology. We had the presentation. Is there anything else that anyone wants to revisit regarding technology tonight? No. All right. With that, I think it's probably the appropriate time to take a 5-minute recess. I will entertain a motion for a recess.
Motion for a 5-minute recess?
Motion, Mr. Slattery, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Manella. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Recess. Call the budget meeting back to order. We are continuing through, we are now on special education.
So I'm not sure what other questions you have. This kind of goes into everything we've already talked about, which is the students that are outplaced and learning to get off of email. So I don't know if anybody has any further.
Well, page one, right, is a summary regarding the 11 students and the costs, and then the second page here is a summary of where the students attend, right? Both magnet schools and private school settings, as well as the projected budget costs for those. That's really the detail by location.
Right, and obviously, this could all change tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, and it might have even changed since we did it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it did. So it's very fluid.
So,
And we do have students that attend magnet schools, and they receive special education services, and we have to pay for those services, so that's what some of that is. Like, we pay if they get speech, social work, OT, PT, special education services, anything like that, we pay that tuition.
All
And
right.
that's very fluid too, and changes all throughout the year.
Yeah,
So
so-
the magnet schools don't cover that when a student goes there?
Nope. The district
Still the
still
district.
we do all the PPT, we do all the paperwork, we still are responsible for the student and their IEP. We also have to pay for students that have Title IVs and get any services.
So just for clarification, so if there's a para that's hired for a student, are they our employee?
No.
No, they're the
They bill us.
employee of the school.
They're the employee of the school, but they bill us.
They don't.
Yep.
Interesting.
I think Ms. Manella had a question.
Yeah, in the past, we used to have, we're under student, we would have the actual number of students that went to that particular school.
That's on the,
Transportation and
under the
magnet.
transportation
Transportation
page,
and
there's a
magnet.
magnet
Okay.
school with it
Got it.
broken out,
All right, thank you.
a couple tabs down, and we'll get to that tab, and we,
Want to put it here, Maria, because it identifying,
Okay.
right,
Potentially, if, depending on if,
there's only
how many
11
is at
kids.
one, if there's one
Right,
student at one
someone
place.
from the community that can figure that out, so it's not
Yeah.
here, but they're on the other page, all the magnet schools list how many students.
Okay.
All right, questions to my left on the summary page here? Any questions? And again, to my right, anything else? All right, CIP. Chuck, are you walking us through this?
Sure. So, on this page is a 10-year plan of our major projects that we're looking to get accomplished over that period of time. The first column, you see what the town adopted for this year. Large projects are the GMS roof replacement project that's currently out to bid. We did get some money towards the science classrooms that we got accomplished this previous summer. So that makes up what we have in for this current budget. Next year, we're requesting the Stevens HVAC. We do have a small portion of that out to bid now. That bid is due July 31st, so we'll see how that comes in. That is a
January 31st, right?
yeah, January, I'm sorry. Large dollar project, being that it's so large, we've kind of have it phased over a couple different years now. So, the first phase of that is what we're requesting in our CIP for the 23-24 budget, as well as another phase of the science classrooms at GMS. They are looking to regrout the pool this year. So with that, there are some pumps that need to be replaced at the high school in the pool area. So we did put $100,000 in this year's CIP, as well as some classroom furniture. And then outgoing, I'll just highlight the larger projects. You know, we still do have a roof replacement at West Hill that's gonna be needed. We're trying to be realistic and kind of keep this at a level where, you know, hopefully, we'll be able to get that funding from the town. So, you know, that comes into how we look at the projects on an overall basis as well. And that's the reason we had to move the Stevens HVAC project over multiple years to try to kind of smooth out that dollar value at the end.
All right, any questions on the CIP? All right, to my left. Amber.
I have a question. So the town adopted for the year that we're in $2 million. Is that a normal amount and so that we're coming in low for 23, 24, or is the current year high?
I think some of the, you know, factors that came into play there were, we knew that we were going to be coming in on the operating side relatively high with the ESSER funds going away. So knowing that, you know, we did try to lessen our CIP dollar value a little bit because, you know, it's one big pot. And so we tried to take into consideration that as well.
And if I can
Okay.
speak to that too, the other issue, Amber, is, you know, we can't do half a roof. It just, you're always
Nope.
gonna end up with a leak, you know, the
Well,
potential
Yeah.
for a leak. The HVAC project was similar to GMS, we phased, we did GMS, so Stevens were able to phase. So there are cliffs, I guess, or high points tied to when we do the projects that can't be phased. And the next one you'll see here is the West Hill roof as well.
Right.
You know, the thought may be whether or not that goes out another year, which would then push out the GMS tech ed renovations, because I do think it needs to be looked at on a level funded basis where, you know, it's a consistent 1.5, 1.3 million a year. I guess the conversation down the road for future boards may be the argument of, you know, in what condition is the West Hill roof versus the tech ed and media center renovations at GMS, you know? Can you get 2 more years out of West Hill? Is it leaking? Is there problems where the GMS project could potentially leapfrog in front of it?
right. Which is, I asked not because of the roof, but I was looking at the 2 GMS projects, the tech ed
Yeah.
and that front entrance. And I know you were pushing the front entrance before.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, it's fine, it's dated, but having walking under it quite often lately, it's really down looking.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like the panels are missing and, yeah.
So, and that's part, and then the other issue is that we do, you know, to the town's benefit, we do get reimbursement for the roof projects, you
Right.
know? So
Right.
the actual net cost to the town is slightly lower potentially than what's built into the plan.
Got it.
All right, any thoughts on the CIP? Fingers crossed, Chuck, we're going out to bid this month, right, for the GMS roof? Ron?
Bid opening is Tuesday.
For the roof? Wow, all right, so a lot of interested parties?
We had 6 firms.
Good. That's competitive, good.
Good.
Good, all right, so before we adopt our budget, we'll know what our number is tied to that project, so that's good. That's good. All right, any questions on the CIP? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to transportation. Chuck, is this you?
Yeah. So we are in the second year of our 5-year contract with New Britain Transportation. The budget, next year, we will be in the 3rd year, but we are currently in the 2nd year. That contract does reflect a 3% increase over each year within the 5-year contract, and they do provide our daily regular transportation, the late bus for the GMS and the high school, special ed in district, as well as special ed out of district, although, you know, we do also use another carrier for some of those runs for out district. Yeah. Our athletic field trips as well as field trips. And New Britain Transportation has been doing a very good job. Very happy with their service that they provide to date. The next page, if anybody has, does anybody have any questions on that page?
Any questions? Any schools? No? All right.
The next page is the chart that Marie has been referring to as far as the students who are attending magnet schools. We do have currently 66 attending the correct magnet schools out of Hartford, and another 29 attending other Hartford magnet schools. The correct magnet schools, we are required to pay a tuition. It is the state funds a portion of that as well. That's why you see, those figures being a lower amount than what our individual per student cost is, because the state subsidizes those tuitions to the magnet schools. However, they were flat, and now they're continually going up from a cost standpoint, although the number of students that we have going to the magnet schools has decreased dramatically over when this program
Used to be over
first started.
200, right?
Yeah, yep.
It's also, this is also a very fluid number too, because the kids get accepted in like, I think the lottery's in like February. So, and they have until like May or June to say if they're gonna go. So this number is constantly changing, and then kids will go, tons of them come back throughout the year. They come back, so it's also a very fluid number.
I want to see this number at 0, but, I mean, I think we offer good schools here, so, I'm glad it's come down I'm just very blunt about it. I think the staff here does a great job, and if you're a Rocky Hill taxpayer, choose a Rocky Hill school.
Based on our test scores and results, we're
Yeah,
certainly
and we've seen
providing
this number
quality product.
declining significantly over the last 10 years, so
Yeah.
that says a good thing about the
A lot of the kids
school
do
district.
return. A lot of them don't stay the whole time. At some point, they do.
Yeah. Some of it is marketing too. They
Sure.
put fancy names on their schools, and, that attracts some parents and students as well.
Sure. Any
I was
questions?
just gonna
to my-
say that, we need a marketing campaign to keep the kids in our school. I'm serious.
This is a very low
I'm
number compared to
serious.
10, 12
Yeah,
years ago.
It was a lot more.
It was over
It's
200 at one point.
Yeah, yeah, before we started the high school
I
project.
think
it
the
certainly was.
facilities projects have helped
Yeah.
keep families in town. The new Moser School, the renovated high school.
Yeah.
I think, people are excited about those projects, and I think the quality, the teaching staff is excellent here, and I think, to Mr. Dillon's point, the test scores, and it's a convenience thing. If you live in town, why send your kid on a bus for 45 minutes?
Longer.
Yeah, the transportation is tough. That's a lot. That's a big reason why kids return a lot.
Yeah.
Is the transportation.
It's a long bus ride. Even though it's 12 or 14 miles into Hartford, it's still a long bus ride.
Any questions to my left on magnet school tuition? To my right? Okay, we're gonna hop over to facilities and maintenance. What do we have here, Jeff?
This is just same type of report that you saw earlier from an object standpoint, but, here we just break out strictly, what's considered within our facilities budget. So it just gives you, because of the number of buildings that we have within the district and whatnot, we do a breakout, just to show you what goes into managing those facilities. It requires a lot of staff. As we've seen, the utilities, are a pretty large expense. The repairs and maintenance associated with the buildings, and, on an overall basis, for the number of facilities we have a pretty competitive budget from that standpoint.
All right, we'll go through page 1. We got overtime, professional development, and service contracts. Any questions to my right? To my left, any questions? I have one. Chuck, what's the $10,000 increase for services at West Hill? 9,576
Okay,
service contract?
yep. Let me
It just, it stands out a little bit looking at the other ones.
I can actually answer that.
Okay, go ahead.
What do we got, Ron?
That is for the preventive maintenance on the building automation. That's a new system that was installed as part of the HVAC project, so we have, a big part of that is the building automation.
Who's the vendor for that?
That's
SNE?
SNE.
Okay. And that is, what is that, quarterly or monthly PMs?
That's quarterly, that's a full cycling of all valves, fan motors, overall, just, it's almost like a mini reconditioning quarterly.
Okay. All right, moving on to page 2. Any questions on page 2? To my right, any questions? We have the utilities here, custodial. To my left? Okay. All right, moving on to page 3, repair and building maintenance. Any questions on that? To my right? To my left? Guess I gotta ask you, Chuck. So we just have a line item switch between 16,000 between West Hill and, is 5 West Hill? I always get these confused. Yeah, West
Right.
Hill and Stevens?
I think that's the gym floors, correct, Ryan?
Yeah, that, Stevens is due for a full sanding and restriping, so I've been carrying that number over the last couple of years to get the gym to be done again, so.
Okay. Okay. Moving on to page 4, utilities, electric and gas, small equipment. Oh, Mr.
I will say one thing. I was at West Hill the other day for, the kids are doing soccer there now. The gym looks great.
Came
It
out nice,
really
yeah.
came out nice. We walked in, it was brighter. I was like, oh my, what happened here? I mean, it really looks great. So you guys are doing a great job.
Okay, any other, to my right, page 4, any questions? Left? No? All right, page 5, it's just got some uniforms. Any questions on that? All right. Moving on. Nearing the end here, huh?
That's it. That's it.
That is it. We are at the end. All right. Let's open the floor up, see if we have any thoughts, comments, or questions from any board members. I'll start to my right. Ms. Roll. No? Okay. Mr. Pareto?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Mr. Gavin? Ms. Tucker?
No, not this time.
Okay. Ms. Manella?
I just want to thank Dr. Zito and his team. I think you guys did a wonderful, fabulous job. It's going to be really tough if we have to go back and cut any more, because I think this is a really lean budget. I'm really proud to live in this town, and I think it stands for it. This budget is really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Slattery?
I think all my questions were asked. Thank you, everyone, not only for putting in the work, but also just making it in such a presentable way that you can see it different ways and kind of really digest it. So it definitely makes it easier, makes our jobs easier to understand it. Thank you.
Yeah, overall, I think thank you to you and your team, Dr. Zito. Everyone did an excellent job. Thank you for presenting this in what looks to be potentially a difficult budget year based on the fact that,
Yeah.
you know, we've lost the ESSER money here and we've sort of fallen off the cliff a little bit with funding sources. I do want to just talk about 2 items that came up tonight before we close. Do I have this right? The stereoscopes, is that what we're calling?
Stereoscopes.
Stereoscopes. So are we talking about adding them in lieu of microscopes or with the microscopes? Where did, I know we kicked it around. Do you want to
So,
say something?
yeah, so I just reached out to, honestly, my daughter's teacher to find out what it is that they needed, and she wrote back and said, no, it's not microscopes, it's the stereoscopes they want. So I'm assuming that's what they want, but I would default to maybe Ms. Lestro asking just one more time what they really want, and it seems reasonable, so I would say that we would keep it in. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
And I guess that's, so, we're still deliberating, so
Right.
we can put all this forward.
Right.
So is the thought that we're adding stereoscopes and repairing the
Take-
microscopes, or we're gonna, in lieu of, and you don't have to give an answer tonight, but are we revisiting this?
Yeah, let us work on it a little bit, and then we can come back with some quotes and a proposal,
Okay.
and what the impact would be on the budget. Like I said, we called one of the science teachers from my office today, and, her comment was, we probably have 25 to 30 scopes total, including both kinds, assigned to grade 6. They don't use them in 7th and 8th unless there's a specific need, and then the 7th or 8th grade teacher will go down and say, hey, I need 5 today for my lab. The kids often work with partners in science, so, we'll get you a quote, and I don't think it'll be a tremendous impact on the budget, so we can certainly do some work on
And
that.
the other thing where I was going to look at this is, because are we buying equipment too with the 7th grade science package? I know we haven't gone out in the street with it yet, but at some point we should plan on it. When we did the 8th grade, did we
So
just?
Ron would know the answer. I think.
Did we
it-
buy
was
any
it
equipment with
plus
that
the
package?
furniture?
The
Yeah.
FF&E that was part of the project, which, were primarily furniture, goggle cabinets, shelving, and that sort of thing. We did not buy.
Right.
Okay. Because we can also think about,
Yeah, the lab equipment.
we can always think about doing that as an alternate and see what we get for pricing too. So we don't have to accept it. So that's something to think about as well, is building it into the project as an alternate. Whatever's tied to, I don't know what 7th grade is for equipment.
They don't really use the microscopes in 7th grade.
I know you were
but
saying 6 for that, but I don't know
Six,
whatever's
yeah.
tied to 7th, but.
We can
certainly-
talk to the teachers.
Okay, all right. And then my last two comments were going back to Mr. Gavin's thoughts on tech. We should certainly reconvene with tech and talk about where we're going. I think that's gonna be a very lively discussion, so if we can get that spreadsheet put together. I also want to revisit whether or not there's more important things than the handsets right now needing to be replaced. If we can get 1 or 2 more years with the existing handsets and focus more on the more critical infrastructure of our system, I think that's also a conversation we should be having as well. And then the last thing is, as we move towards budget adoption, I know I mentioned this before, but the classroom furniture, previously the boards have made a commitment that it's part of the CIP. So I would like to take that out of the budget, put it into the CIP, and look for classroom furniture being consistently funded that way, just so it's all in one place. And I know we also talked about the iPads for the GMS Library and Media Center. Those should be in the tech package too, because sometimes we had learned that these items get spread out in too many line items. I'd rather have them consolidated in one area so we see where all the iPads are, all the computers, same thing, all the classroom furniture. It's all in the CIP. That's just my 2 cents on it. All right, any final, I know you had to see, that's why I didn't want to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Gavin, someone just lost money because of Mr. Gavin's
It was Jay. Oh, I'm sorry. I was really hoping it was Jay. And Jay does not want you to replace the microscopes that he once used. If you replace one of the microscopes that Jay used, he would like one. Just a quick question. When we were talking about the grants or as far as when it comes to the school, if we're not going to have free lunch, I think, starting
March.
relatively soon, is there an expectation that those applications will increase for next year?
There could be, but there's currently legislation out there to, I think, fund this year now as an emergency legislation to continue with free lunch. So that's
Gotcha.
floating out there. That may become the norm. Yeah, you've been reading about it more and more.
October
Yeah.
number,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the most important.
stuff.
yeah. And I guess as Chris had mentioned, he
That's the
has
big
some
Yeah.
form of budget if they are gonna get rid of, I mean,
Well,
if they're gonna make
I think, but just to your first question, I think Dr. Zito, I mean, if this goes away, they're gonna have to come up with a new formula, because if.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm done.
Sorry.
I was actually gonna ask the same question, kind of the
That's
same
tough.
question, because I didn't quite understand how that grant funding worked. But so it's based on number of students that qualify, or,
So,
Okay.
what happens is, the state has a calculation, and Chuck and I tried to understand what it was. We call the state, they're a little gray, but it has to do with the number of free and reduced lunch students who have submitted the appropriate paperwork for the entire district. But there's also additional things that go into that allotment. They'll also look at the wealth in our town, they told us, and there's several other factors. So they use that calculation, and that determines the set amount that we get for our Title I allocation. So that is determined across our district. And then what they charge us to do is to look at that allocation, and we have to divide it up to the school that is most in need. So to do that, we look at our October 1st free and reduced calculations for each of the schools. We divide it by the total number of enrollment at the school based on October 1st. And then we look at that percentage. So from that, we calculate the district average of what our free and reduced lunch or poverty status is. We get a district percentage. And then any of our schools that are over that district percentage, they are the schools that the state says we have to allocate our money for those grants that are targeting poverty, so to speak, or
Right.
lower socioeconomic students. Does that make sense?
yes, it
Okay.
does. Thank you for explaining that.
Yes.
Okay. One more time, to my right, any final thoughts or questions? To my left, Mr. Gavin.
Told you I was done.
All right.
All set, no questions.
Okay, where we stand tonight, it looks like we will not need to have, I think it was our February 2nd, our third workshop. I'm gonna ask Dr. Zito and his team to put together the balance of information that's been requested. In the interim, it may make sense to convene some of the committees that wanted to talk, especially curriculum regarding some of the technology issues, facilities in regards to the budget. And then I think we can put some recommendations together and then talk about doing a final budget to adopt. We do have till March, correct, Dr. Zito, to adopt? So I think we can spend the next few weeks having those subcommittee meetings if needed, get information back from Dr. Zito, having those dialogues at the committee level, and then reconvening. Any future work can certainly be done as part of a board meeting in advance, too, so we don't have to spend extra nights doing this, so that will work as well. With that, any final thoughts from any board members? No?
I kind
oh.
of want to filibuster for Mr. Mays, but
Dr. Zito, again, thank you to you and your team for all of
Thank
your
you.
efforts. Honestly, we really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight, listening to us talk and debate. Must be boring, but thank you for coming. With that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Slattery. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Tucker. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.